Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Braver New Worlds, the podcast about the stories we need to tell for the future we want to see. My name is Nathan Young. I am your host, and today's guest is Professor Jessica Barlow of San Diego State University. Jessica is the Executive Director of the Center for Regional Sustainability and the co-founder of the SAGE project at SDSU, and that is a program that connects students and faculty with cities, nonprofits, and community organizations, help them tackle some challenges together. I was really intrigued to have this conversation because I've always been a bit frustrated by the way colleges and universities can be a bit detached from the communities that they're connected to. And obviously there's some gradation in this. There's plenty of instances where students and faculty and staff are engaged with the communities in which the universities are located, but there's also that ivory tower narrative that a lot of universities have of being a bit detached from the communities they're involved with. They're a bit detached from the realities even of the industries that a lot of the students are going to necessarily graduate into. And even, when they are engaged, it could be a lot more sort of theoretical, and it's not always in touch with what's actually happening in the real world outside of the university. And so, in a lot of ways that ivory tower narrative isn't completely undeserved. So what if, how to break that down? What if universities weren't just places where knowledge is created, but places where that knowledge is actively put to work, solving actual problems out in the world, and not just by like the researchers in the institutions, but having that built in as a value that the university honors and has the students engage with as part of like their learning experience at the university. Because, as I say kind of early on in this episode too, like students need experience, universities have students, they have solutions, they have ideas, communities need help. Like it just seems like a good combination. So in this conversation with Jessica, we talk about why students learn best when they're out like working on these real world problems, like actually like engaging with it. Also a little bit about like why universities often struggle to connect with the communities they serve and what might be possible if more institutions saw civic engagement as part of their core mission rather than just this sort of optional add-on that some of them do. And so if you've ever wondered, how we can better connect knowledge with action and how ordinary people can get involved in creating positive change in their communities, I think you're going to really enjoy this episode. So without any further ado, here is my discussion with Professor Jessica Barlow. Jessica Barlow, welcome to the podcast.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
And so we've known each other for a long time, but just for the folks at home who don't know who you are, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah. So I'm a professor at San Diego State University. I trained as a linguist, phonologist in particular, and spent many years in the School of Speech, Language, and Hearing Sciences. But now I am currently in the geography department with a title of Professor of Sustainability because my career really has just taken a strange turn to do involving community-based participatory research and working on environmental justice issues in the community and a lot of partnerships with local community organizations, which I never get tired of talking about.
Okay, cool. Perfect. Well,
Yeah.
we'll ask you all about all this stuff here then. Because yes, what we're talking about then is the students at the university getting involved in community-based projects. And like, just on a first gut level, it just sounds like such a great and obvious idea, right? Like communities need help. Universities are in communities. The students at universities need experience. So that seems pretty obvious, right? Like,
absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. And it's strange that it's not happening everywhere all the time. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, okay. So then you have a specific project called SAGE. So can you just tell us a bit
SAGE
about
project.
that?
Yeah. So this is actually a program that is modeled after what we call now the EPIC model, Educational Partnerships for Innovation in Communities. And that started at the University of Oregon with their Sustainable City Year program. And that they started probably 15 years ago or so. And universities around the country started replicating the model. Now it is an international model. Universities in Africa, sub-Saharan Africa, Southeast Asia, Latin America are all replicating this model. Basically, the way it works is it's this large scale partnership between the university and a community organization, most often a city or some kind of municipality, but not always. It could be nonprofits, state agencies, a variety of different types of partnerships could occur. And the community partner brings projects to the university. So we have a community partner, they bring a project to us and say, we need help with this. This is
Mhm.
a priority for us. This is already part of our budget. This is already part of our, our plan or general plan or
Mhm.
a specific plan. And we need more capacity. And then we match those projects with faculty and their courses at the
Mhm.
university. So these are classes that faculty members are already teaching. That's already part of their course load. These are classes that students are going to take part of their
Mhm.
major or as an elective. And we just embed the project into the class, and the professor teaches the class in the way they normally do, with in meeting all the kind of learning outcomes that are necessary, and the students actually are learning these sort of best practices, cutting edge research, but learning how to apply this kind of research to a context specific issue, and then in turn provide their sort of ideas, recommendations, solutions, designs for the community partner that's tailored to them, so that they can, sort of advance those goals that they have set out to do.
Okay. Can you give us like some examples of specific projects that have happened?
Yeah, we've done a lot. So we've, first of all, involved, I think, over 40 different disciplines now
Cool.
from the university. So
Mhm.
it is a whole range of different types of projects. A lot of the types of projects are, they could be related to wayfinding or
Mhm.
branding needs. So we did a whole wayfinding system for the city of National City.
Mhm.
They actually didn't use our design, but the work that we did actually helped them create or
Mhm.
apply for and get over $1 million in funding to support their needs for wayfinding.
Oh, wow.
So and that's often what communities need, is like, I just need a design so we can apply for this grant. And, and sometimes they really love our designs
Mhm.
though, and will
Mhm.
use it. So
Yeah.
that's one. We've done a lot of work on with GIS, geographic information systems,
Mhm.
mapping different community assets. So we mapped all the urban trees in Lemon Grove.
Yeah.
We mapped all the assets, the park assets in the city of Santee. So
Mhm.
slides, bathrooms, trash cans, and then also in Santee we did street segments and pedestrian ramps, and whether they were American with Disabilities Act compliant or
Mhm.
not.
Mhm.
Things like that. I could go on and on, but those are a few examples.
Yeah. Well, based on those examples, it does sound like the kind of thing that like it's one of those things that would just be on the to-do list of some city manager, but just hard to get
Yeah.
to.
Yes, absolutely.
Just
Yeah.
like go out and like, yeah, map all the trees or like figure out where all of our ramps are, or just like I need a basic design for
Mhm.
some wayfinding, and of all the things that they're managing, just things like that just get hard to get to. And I guess that's,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm relating as like a small business person,
Hmm.
and there's just always like, you get to like the top 7 or 8 things on your to-do list, and then there's other stuff that like you should, but you just don't get there. So,
Yeah, and I always use that an example like that. I often say, city managers are usually dealing with putting out literal and figurative fires,
hmm
or
hmm
dealing with floods or pandemics, and so these things sort of linger on their desks, and are keep getting pushed aside because of more pressing matters. But
hmm
they still need to get these things done. I think it also is really helpful because students, they're not replacing consultants, but
hmm
they actually can get a city or community partner, whether it's a nonprofit or a municipality, get them farther along on the goal of a project by giving them a whole bunch of different ideas. And then they say, okay, that's the idea that fits with us. That's
hmm
what really connects with us as a community. And so then we'll go hire a consultant with really knowing what we want.
Okay.
Because I mean, if you hired, so for example, so like I said, we do a lot of branding stuff,
Mhm.
like logo design, things like that, and that can be really expensive if
Yeah,
you
yeah, yeah,
hire a
yeah.
consultant,
Mhm,
and the consultant's only going to give you maybe a couple ideas, and
mhm,
we'll give them, sometimes 10.
mhm, mhm,
And then it's not perfect, and then we can further develop that design afterwards, or they can, they have some sort of inspiration from those designs that say, okay, now we understand what fits us, what is
yeah,
appropriate for us, and so they're spending their money better doing that.
mhm.
So
Okay. Well, and so is it primarily doing work with like cities and municipalities? Is there other opportunities there too?
we've done a lot with lately, in particular with nonprofits. So and sometimes it's a collaboration between all three. So some of the work that we're doing, sort of a sister program that we
Mm.
have, is our Brownfields project. And we have engaged the Sage project on aspects of that work. And I'll talk about what Brownfields are in a minute. But in for that work, we are collaborating with multiple different organizations, but specifically the City of National City, as well as several nonprofits that are in National City, as well as a few that are in surrounding areas, all kind of impacted in this work that this has started with and then has expanded to. So what brownfields are, they are parcels of land that are contaminated or perceived to be contaminated because of prior use. So these could be places where there was a dry cleaner, former like a gas station, auto body shop, some kind of industrial activity, and they often sit vacant for a really long time because developers don't want to take the risk if it is contaminated, because there's usually a lot of money involved to remediate a site or clean up a site, or to deal with whatever needs to be done to make it a safe place. And they also happen to occur more often in communities of color, lower income communities, communities that are already facing a whole bunch of other kinds of environmental and socioeconomic burdens. And so community members that are living near brownfields tend to live near a lot of brownfields. And so there's a lot of funding now from the federal, or not now, but there has been for a while, federal funding, and it continues to this day, federal funding for brownfields, because it is an economic opportunity as well. So economic development is an important component of brownfield assessment and cleanup and reuse. Fortunately, nonprofits and municipalities can apply for funding to address the brownfields that occur throughout the country.
Yeah.
The state.
Cool. Well, so I'm curious to go back to the students too a little bit. It's just like, how is this different from, say, an internship?
Great question. So typically internships are maybe just one student or a couple students doing very intensive work on a particular project in service of a community partner. And that's not usually part of, they might sign up for a class to get units associated with that, but there isn't a faculty member who's sort of guiding every step of the way. There is sort of like a job, a position that they're doing. But what makes it an internship that they can get course credit for is that they're also kind of reflecting on the experience as it ties to their academic experience. But those tend to be, especially if they're paid, it's, a community partner paying for one student, maybe 20 hours a week, minimum wage, hopefully more. But it ends up being more expensive than in many cases, than if they did a partnership with, for example, Sage, where it's an entire class doing this work. And so what's really nice about, say there's a class that's got 30 students and the whole class is focusing on this. That means you are getting 30 students worth of effort and time and energy, with the variations that naturally occur, and the variations in quality of output as well. But you're not risking it all on one person. You are what you're getting, which is awesome, is a range of ideas, or a range of kind of perspectives on what possible solutions are. And then community partner can sort of pick and choose from those ideas to, according to what best fits for their community and their community needs and things like that. So it's a much larger scale engagement with lots of students. Since we launched in 2013, we've had over 6,000 students involved in this.
Oh, wow.
And you can only manage that number of students by doing it through, you can, but it's hard. But through a class. And all these students doing it through their class, they have the supervision of their faculty member who's teaching them all of these things and sort of guiding them in their process, their research, their, the solutions that they're developing. So there's some quality control there as well.
And are they getting like insight into, what the value of that is, what that work is? Because like if you want to list all the different park assets or something, like, I could see students not really understanding, like, well, okay, sure, here's a bunch of slides, here's like, they don't, and they just kind of give a list. But as far as like formatting it in a way that's easier for the professionals at the different municipalities to, like, okay, integrate that into what they're doing, or I don't know, like how do you bridge that way that basically students would talk versus the way professionals would talk in that workflow?
Yeah, that's a great question. So one of the things that we try to make happen every time, every semester, every class, is that we bring members from the community partner, the city staff, something like, or, staff member from the nonprofit to the class and
Hmm.
present to the class and explain their needs, explain why, they're here. We explain what the partnership is. And then there are touch points throughout the entire
Hmm.
semester. So we never stop communicating.
Yeah.
I, as the director of the program, I'm in constant communication with our
Hmm.
community partners, multiple times a week, often, sometimes multiple times a
Hmm.
day, especially during the beginning and end of the semester. And the students are going out and doing site visits, at the location of the
Hmm.
project. And so there's this ongoing engagement happening. And so the students are really getting it, like, oh, this isn't just for my professor.
Hmm.
This is actually something that is going to matter. And
Hmm.
I'm delivering this, I'm doing this work to benefit a community partner. And we try and start in, the faculty members are really great at doing this too. We start from the very beginning of trying to figure out what our common language is, what are the
Hmm.
common terms that we're using,
Hmm.
and part of the challenge is the students have to learn how to express themselves in a
Hmm.
way that someone beyond just their professor or their classmates
Yeah.
understands them. And so they're getting all these other kind of soft skills
Hmm.
in the
Hmm.
process of doing this work. And then they present the work to the community partners at the end of the semester in either a classroom presentation, or sometimes we do poster
Hmm.
presentations, sort of like an expo kind of thing. Yeah. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's an ongoing sort of interactive experience.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting too, because the reason I ask is like the handful of times in my life where I've had somebody sort of fresh fresh out of college that I've worked with, or just like really early in the career that I've worked with, that is this sort of subtle but frustrating aspect of working with them, is that
Hmm.
they just don't, they're not familiar with presenting information in a way that cycles into a professional flow of how things work, or ideas might be a little bit pie in the sky sometime. I would
Hmm.
say that comes up,
Hmm.
or I think of even like when I started, I just had unrealistic like I had no understanding of what happens in like offices when I started a job. So I was just trying my best to like format things how I saw it, but I was just kind of playing the part at first. So
Yeah, no, and that's true that, like, sometimes, and I think this is what it makes it a little bit less risky for cities to engage in these partnerships, because say I hired a consultant, paid
hmm.
tons of money, and
Hmm.
one of the recommendations was just so far out there and unrealistic and just not at all possible. The city staff person would probably be a little bit worried about their job, right? Or be yelled at the least, and by sort of doing this, by working with students and getting a whole range of different ideas, some of
Hmm.
which are out there, some of which are really, really awesome.
Yeah, totally.
The ones that are out there, they're gonna be like, oh, they're just students, they're learning, they
Hmm.
don't quite
Hmm.
know what our context is, they haven't quite learned our community or what's possible, so they can kind of not worry about that kind of risk. But then on
Hmm.
the other side, when they see these really amazing designs and ideas that they get from the students, they're like, weren't we smart to
Yeah,
partner
yeah,
with a
yeah,
university?
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's sort of, I like to say it's I say win, 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 but
Hmm.
it's a win-win for a city because it's
Hmm.
not costing them a lot of money
Hmm.
compared to a consultant, and they are still getting great ideas, and it's at least helping them move forward on what they're trying to do. It may not finish a project, but it gets
Yeah.
them the next step
Yeah.
forward. One of my favorite stories to tell about something that you were sort of touching on, about like students knowing how to
Hmm.
talk to people and stuff like that. We rarely work with freshman classes, not by
Hmm.
policy. It's just that's how it works out. Most of the time, it's upper division or graduate level classes.
Hmm.
Every once in a while, though, we'll have a lower division class, like a group of freshmen. And we one year had a class of freshmen, very first semester,
Hmm.
so September, and working with a project with us in National City. And we actually did a site visit to the city, and we were all sitting around a table at the Chamber of Commerce because they generously let us use their room.
Hmm.
And there were several, people in coats and ties, presenting to the students, and it should have been a really big deal to the students. And
Hmm.
some of the students were just sitting there, sort of like looking down. Nobody was taking notes. They're like, some of them were looking at their phones, and I was just horrified, like,
Yeah.
what have we done? And
Just
I was
had.
just really
Mhm.
terrified about what was going to happen. And they just didn't engage, didn't make eye contact or anything.
Mhm.
These are like really young kids, right?
Yeah.
And by the end of the semester, this is just how transformative freshman year
Hmm.
can be for students.
Yeah.
At the end of the semester, they had to do class presentations,
Hmm.
and the same city staff people came wearing coats and ties, all
Hmm.
official, like step into the classroom, and the students each had to get up and present, and they were speaking directly to the community members. They were gesturing, they were really
Hmm.
poised, they were using the right language. And I just couldn't believe it. I was so
Yeah.
impressed and so happy and proud. And, like it's incredible to see that kind of transformation. So, I'm in it for the community, but of
Yeah.
course the students benefit too. And it's really exciting to see that.
Well, that's interesting too, because I was curious to ask you about like what the students get out of it, but also, connected to that is there's a sort of narrative you hear a lot about just like how clueless young people are right now, or behind, or like they don't want to work, or all these sort of narratives about just how like this upcoming generation is like they're going to struggle in the professional world.
Hmm.
And I tend to see that as like a two-way street. Like
Hmm.
professional world's got to meet them
Yeah,
halfway, something.
I
But
agree with that. Hmm.
I do, I do. And also like just the world is changing also, right?
Yeah.
Like I think I sort of had a better understanding of the professional world I was being ushered into from like junior high on. And I came to age like right in the middle of the dot-com boom. So it was different, but it was
Hmm.
still like kind of the same. And
Hmm.
I don't know that like, I wonder what kind of vision, it's hard to like understand like what kind of vision that a young person would get for like what their professional world is going to look like also. So,
Yeah. Yeah, well, I think I really strongly feel that this kind of experiential learning is one of the
mhm,
most important things that they can be doing. And I think this is important from the beginning, right?
mhm,
Like no matter what generation you're a part of, these are important experiences. But I think
mhm,
because it forces problem solving and
yeah,
critical thinking, because what often happens from my own experience in teaching at the university level, even with problem based learning, the problems are usually ones that you've provided that
mm,
have been cleaned up in some way so that there is a more or less correct answer,
mhm,
or at least ballpark. Yeah, and they are kind of devoid of context. They're not
mhm,
messy and therefore not very realistic. It makes it easier to grade that way, but it doesn't really expose students to the messiness
mhm,
and sort of the stories, the emotions, the complexities of a real community. And
mhm,
so by engaging students in these kinds of experiences, we're like, well, this is what we learned in the textbook, and this is the textbook
mhm.
said, and this is what that paper that we read
Yes.
said, and these are the formulas we use to answer this
Mhm, mhm,
problem. Okay, now we have this really messy community, messy in the sense that there are people who have
mhm,
different opinions, and there are constraints on money and how you spend the money, and
mhm,
there are the slope of this land doesn't is not amenable to putting in this sign, like
mhm,
anything you can imagine. There's going to be some complications and disagreements. And that, I think, you can't substitute that for helping students learn and
mhm,
problem solve and be good critical thinkers. And so I think that's one of the most important things about a college education, or
mhm.
education generally. And so the more that we can provide students those kinds of experiences, the better.
Yeah, yeah.
But I also, just to think about like preparing for the workforce, I have so many stories of students who have just having participated in one of these classes. They just
Mhm.
enrolled in a class and did this project, and they put it on their resumes.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
then they
yeah.
get to talk about it when they go for job interviews. And
Mhm.
we've had several students be hired by our city partners
Oh, cool.
to
I was curious
work
about
for
that.
them.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So there's some really neat, great stories about
Mhm.
how students have sort of taken advantage of this opportunity and really gone on with it to work with our community partners, work in the community, and continue to make a difference, which I love. That's what makes this the most fun to
Yeah. As much as I love doing this podcast, sad truth of it all is that doesn't pay the bills. It actually costs me money to make this podcast. But that's okay. I love doing it, so we're doing it. What does pay the bills for me is I help individuals and organizations leverage the power of storytelling for leadership and persuasion. This is the work I do, and I want to tell you about it real quick here. For organizations, a lot of times the work is very much focused on fundraising for nonprofits, or developing a narrative strategy for the important messages that they want to get out in their campaigns. It can also be about developing leadership and communication skills amongst the team that you've already got working within your organization. For individuals, a lot of my work revolves around helping develop a narrative-based communication approach for those high-leverage career moments that come up from time to time, like giving a public talk, interviewing for a new position, integrating into a new role at a new company, or making the leap for yourself to jump into entrepreneurship, and how you talk about the work that you do with the external audiences there too. These are very much the moments that can have a huge impact on your career. And by utilizing storytelling and narrative, you can not only communicate a more resonant message about what it is you're doing, but also one that's going to stick. So if this is intriguing to you and you want to know more, you can check out my website, storycultureconsulting.com. I'll have a free tool on there that's available for download, or you can check out the show notes too. I'll have the same tool down there that you can grab too. Once again, that's storycultureconsulting.com. And now back to the show. Well, so I'm also curious to zoom out on this too, because yeah, it seems like such a smart, intuitive idea. And there's also like a vibes piece where there's that sort of ivory tower narrative against universities, where like universities are just kind of doing their thing in there. And sometimes it's all theoretical, and like what happens when that theory hits the real world, it's not the same. But it also, like, there is a lot of times this separation between a university and a community where the students are going in, they're coming out to party or whatever, but like there's not always that the work that's happening from the students in there, or even like the professors and the staff, isn't always activated for the benefit of the larger community, even though like there's so much intelligence in there that could be helpful, right? And so I guess I'm curious, like, I'm not sure what question I have here. I'm just kind of curious, like, could you comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, basically what you're touching on a few things, but one of the things is knowledge to practice, or translating sort of the science to implementation. And there's actually a discipline called implementation science, but there's, so, and this is a challenge across all disciplines, famously in the medical profession, where, there's something like a 17-year delay between when, medical discovery is made and it's actually implemented in practice, but that applies everywhere, I would assume. And it's in part because of this ivory tower issue, but also in part because so many of us, when I say us, I mean researchers at a university, are not trained to communicate our science except to other scientists, right? And that's where how we're evaluated. And, if we're evaluated for tenure or promotion or to get a new job, our worth is evaluated based on publications in scholarly journals. And I think there is a common, we have had you come do a workshop to help us communicate our science, right?
Work on that,
that was great. But, but one of the challenges is that what we need to do is change the standards for how we evaluate faculty at universities to incorporate community engagement, and lots of universities are doing this now. So this is a common trend that's happening, including at SDSU, where community engagement is becoming more and more relevant to how you evaluate the contributions of a faculty member, the scholarly work of a faculty member. But if we're not being evaluated on that, why are we going to spend time doing this work? I'm doing it because I just love it. And I've never been more inspired than when I started doing this work. And I think that's what happens to a lot of faculty members or researchers when they start doing community-based work. It just opens up a whole new world for them. And that's why I'm doing it. I also started this after tenure, so I had that I wasn't risking much to do it. But so we're not taught to do this. We're not valued for doing it unless, policies are changing. And so there's, I think, this common mentality of like, well, I wrote all these papers, all these people out in the community should read those papers. So practitioners who work at cities should read my papers, or, and I've written a lot in the area of linguistics and speech language pathology. All these speech language pathologists should read my research. And, and it quickly became clear, even when I was working in speech language and hearing sciences, that like, no, you got to bring it to them.
Yeah.
And you gotta talk about it in a way that actually benefits them and makes sense to them and helps them with their particular needs in their context. And that's a challenge in every discipline. But that's why we need more of these sort of partnerships.
Yeah. And it's wild because I talk to a lot of academics in a lot of different fields, and this is a big thing that comes up a lot. And there is a lot of academics do have that point of view of like, well, I wrote the paper on it. Like, just, go. Why are you asking me? Like, go read it, or like, what? I don't have the time to communicate it better, or, there's no incentive structure to communicate it better. Like the paper was the incentive structure. Yeah. And so now it's somebody else's job to do something else with it. And and kind of what I'm hearing you say there, though, is like, it's like almost a culture shift. And where is that culture shift going to come from? And perhaps like you were in a unique position to, take this program and like run with it. And if there's maybe somebody else at another university, they might not have the same opportunity, or
Yep.
it might, be a bigger risk for them,
Hmm.
or there may or may not be different levels of support from the administration or management of the university too, right?
Yeah, and that's exactly what happens. And so there are some universities that have really successfully implemented a program just like this one, and they continue to this day. Been going for
Yeah.
many, many years. I can think of a few that also that launched and started off strong, and
Hmm.
then sort of there was basically one faculty
Hmm.
champion, and then
Hmm.
they got a new job and left the university, and the program died, or
Yeah.
or an administrator who was supportive of the program moved on, and
Hmm.
then the program died. So there needs to be, first of all, there needs to be a champion who will lead the program, and then there should be a succession plan
Yeah. Yeah.
for when they retire and so on. And we have that at SDSU for sure. But there also needs to be support from the administration, and they need to value it, and they need to
Hmm.
continue to, ideally with money they should support it, but
Hmm.
also just giving the space to make it
Hmm.
happen. Giving, for example, I have reduced teaching load so that I
Hmm.
can run this program because it's
Hmm.
really time consuming, and that kind of support also needs to be provided to,
Hmm.
so that people don't get so burnt out because they can't handle the commitment.
Yeah.
So needs to be several things aligned to make it
Hmm.
successful. But I think, what's fun for the university, for SDSU, is I usually just share really good news. I'm like, hey, guess what? This happened,
Yeah. Yeah.
or we just got this grant, or we have
Hmm.
this new community partner. Look at this really cool thing. And so the university likes to celebrate a lot of what
Hmm.
we do, and it makes them look good and all that. But and so I just keep doing that in hopes
Yeah.
that like they'll continue to want to support me and us on all this work. But any university that implements a program like this, it shouldn't live with just one person, or it won't last.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Is there like, I mean, how much structure is this within your university? Is it just you, or is there like, is
Oh,
there
wait, yeah,
a
no, it's just
champion?
not just me. I mean,
Okay.
for a while it was,
Hmm.
and not ever me completely by myself. I mean, it started off with a former dean that we had, Dean
Hmm.
Emeritus Jeff Chase. He was the dean of undergraduate studies at the time,
Hmm.
and he had heard about this program at the University of Oregon,
Hmm.
and just was all behind making this happen, and as well as a coordinator at the university who worked
Hmm.
closely with him and me, and we sort of launched the program. They both moved on, and so for a while
Hmm.
it was just me and some student assistants helping me, like a graduate student assistant, a few graduate student assistants. For a while, we also had a full-time staff person, Christopher Patron Soberano, who helped us, especially with some of our cross-border work in particular.
Hmm.
He was awesome for that. And now the way we have it set up, he moved on to another project,
Hmm.
and the way we have it set up now is we have a sort of associate director, Madison Swain. She's a professor in the School of Public Affairs, and she and I work very closely. I call her my work spouse. We work
Yeah.
especially on the brownfield stuff,
Hmm.
but also on this. And then so she helps in run it with me. And then we also have another faculty member, Jenny Shepard, who's in the rhetoric and writing studies
Hmm.
program, and she is the writing mentor and
Hmm.
report editor, because we generate reports from each of the classes that participate, and she
Hmm.
supports the compilation of those reports. And so,
Okay.
and then a student assistant. So it's a small
Yeah.
shop, but it's but with really great people. And then
Yeah.
it is housed within our Center for Regional Sustainability, which is what I also oversee.
Okay.
And that lives in the geography
Hmm.
department now, but it has lived in several different
Other
places.
places. Yeah.
Yeah.
But so it sounds like it was initially like spearheaded by somebody like a dean, right? And
Yes. Yes.
I guess my presumption is like it's going to have to be somebody at that level that's going to have to make the initiative to make it happen for it to like really work on some level.
Ideally,
Yeah.
and ideally, like they make it happen, then get out of the way.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
But
Yeah. Yeah.
it has happened in other programs, other universities that have implemented it. It started with a
Hmm.
faculty member or a team of faculty members, and then with initial successes, they got buy-in from higher
Hmm.
level, and I've seen them, move from the department to the provost
Hmm.
office, for example. Sometimes they move back, so they move around like we have. We've moved
Hmm.
around a little bit. I think we're in the best location now, though, for lots of different reasons. But yeah, it depends a lot on, because it is a university serving program.
Hmm.
Even though it's in the geography department, it really serves the entire university, and so there's reason to have it at a higher level. But the
Yeah.
higher you go, the more top down
Got it.
involvement there is,
Hmm.
and that
Hmm.
can be stifling in some cases. So
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, so The other thing, though, is I have to imagine this has like I'm speaking on the level of vibes here, also again, but
Mm.
just the partnerships with the communities and with the organizations and stuff. And I think, yeah, I don't know how much universities in general are like partnering with businesses and nonprofits and
Mhm.
municipalities where they're at. I'm sure there's like some conversations, but just I imagine there's got to be like a lot of goodwill and just opportunity and conversation and relationship building that's happening between the
Yeah.
university and all the different partners in a way that might not have been happening otherwise.
Yeah, that is definitely true. And I think
Hmm.
some universities are better at this than others.
Hmm.
San Diego State just happens to have a really good reputation, long-term reputation
Hmm.
for being in the community and involved with community and collaborating with the community. So
Yeah.
that's a kind of reputation we've had well before I started doing any of this work. But I think there are varying levels of engagement
Hmm.
and trust building, relationship building that's happening through that. But perception is huge, though, in
Hmm.
terms of whether a community organization wants to partner with us. And if we had a bad reputation, I'm sure that would make it a lot harder. But
Hmm.
I'll use National City as an example. We started working with them in 2013, and they were willing to take a chance on us. But I was on the phone in meetings, visiting the city
Yeah.
all day long every day. I mean,
Hmm.
I was living and breathing this partnership with National City, in part because I was learning about how cities work.
Yeah.
I've never done this before, so it was like a crash course for me.
Hmm.
But I spent that time really doing my very best to manage expectations
Hmm.
and really make sure that I was supporting the faculty members by making ensuring that they got what they needed for these classes to go well,
Hmm.
so that they could provide what the city needed, but also managing expectations of the city, like, this is the minimum that we can do. You'll
Hmm.
probably get a lot more, but I like work really hard to make sure that the community partners know that we're on their side, and
Hmm.
that because we know the students are going to get a great experience if we do it the way we've been doing it. And so just really making sure that the city knows we care about what they want. We are prioritizing their
Hmm.
needs. We're going to work around their schedules. We work around, the politics,
Hmm.
and don't ruffle feathers, that make their jobs harder. And that's just that is probably the whole communication piece. That is
Hmm.
the most time consuming and challenging, but also, I would say, fulfilling
Yeah.
aspect of the work. But it is ongoing, and so we still work with National City to this day, in
Hmm.
part because we have continued to work on maintaining and continuing to build trust. And same with a lot of the community organizations in National City that we work with.
Hmm.
We worked really hard to stay connected with them, show up just like while something's happening, not to serve our needs, just to say, hi, we're here, what can we
Yeah.
do,
Yeah.
that kind of thing.
Hmm.
So that's, yeah, and that's another reason why this kind of work is hard, because it's really time consuming, but it's
Hmm.
just the payoff for everyone is so great when you really show up for each other.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious too. Like, I imagine there's a lot of ways that this rebounds back to the university in very positive ways, and I'm like can't quite like put my finger on what it would be. And I imagine it'd be like a lot of subtle things. But is there anything that like really comes up for you in that regard? Or
Well, there's lots of good stories.
hmm.
So that we have a lot of sort of news stories that come out either through our SDSU News Center or
Hmm.
through local news channels, news, media, and that positive attention is huge. Also, it brings donors. So donors to the university who see that we're doing this really great work in the community, and that we really care about the community, and also donors who see value in preparing future workforce
Hmm.
with real
Hmm.
world experiences. So I think there's that sort of those positive vibes are really important to the university. We also bring in funding, though, right? And so
Yeah.
that's another, so both contracts and grant funding, and
Hmm.
that also is valued by the university. And of course, better preparing the students for the workforce
Hmm.
is why we're doing this, why we have universities.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
So that these are experiences, they're often called high impact practices,
Mm.
that are known to help students stay in school and finish and have better job prospects. So these are things like doing research, study
Hmm.
abroad, internships, and being in the community. These are all scientifically documented to
Yeah.
be positive experiences for students, and so we're touching on a lot of those types of practices
Hmm.
through these partnerships.
Yeah. Is it, I mean, there's also a piece where like just maybe you or other faculty members involved just kind of have like your finger on the pulse maybe a little bit better
Oh, I
than
would
like
say
you would
so.
either.
Yeah. Yeah. I hadn't thought about it that way, but yes, for sure. I mean, I mean, just from since I've started this program, I know so many more people on campus. I don't
Hmm.
just know the people in my department. I mean, I moved to the geography
Yeah.
department in part because I had started a lot of collaborations with folks there, and it seemed like a natural fit in a lot of
Hmm.
ways. So I know about people. I know what people are doing. I know what, kinds of research are
Hmm.
happening. I often call myself the great networker.
Yeah. Yeah.
It
Yeah.
just in my head, but now I've said it out
Hmm.
loud. But because I'm like, oh, you should meet so and so,
Hmm.
or and so when I meet a lot of new faculty members, like new to the university,
Hmm.
I'm like, I know who you should talk to. You should talk to this person. You should talk to this person. And I
Yeah.
am really good at connecting people now because I know so many people on campus, and I know about so many different initiatives,
Hmm.
that collaborate with Sage or that just are doing other great work. And so, yeah, I have a much better sense of what the university is and who we
Hmm.
are and what we're doing, and that's also, I think I feel more of a part of as a part of
Yeah.
a community. So
Yeah. Well, yeah, because these actual like nonprofits and municipalities too, right? Like, do you have
yeah.
that same level of
Oh yeah,
connection there?
same.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I know more about the greater San Diego Tijuana community, right?
Hmm.
I know people, and even if they move around, I'm like, oh, you're there now. Okay, great.
Yeah.
I've met so many people and learned so much about the community by doing this work that I would have never gotten just by, trying to read the news.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Mm,
Well, I guess that's the part that like maybe I'm hearing, and that's
mhm,
probably a little bit of my bias, but as somebody who's always kind of worked in like media and sales and like
mhm.
like the type of things where networking is valuable, and like just kind of being out there and talking to people and knowing what's going on in the city or in the community and being able to make those connections for people. It's
Yeah.
just like it's a real like subtle, hard to put your finger on type thing, but it's like
Hmm.
really valuable too. And so
It
yeah, I'm
really
just
is.
hearing that. Yeah.
Yeah, and what's funny is I am very much an introvert. I mean, I get taxed
Yeah.
really really easily, but I when I get talking about this, as you can probably tell, I
Yeah.
get very excited and I can talk
Mhm.
all day about it. And I remember in grad school, my mentors were like, you got to get out there and
Mhm.
talk to people.
Mhm.
When you go to these conferences, you got to go up to people and talk to them. And I was
Mhm.
just like, that sounds like my worst nightmare. I
That's
am not
terrible.
doing that.
Yeah.
And I never really did much of it
Mhm.
as sort of in that role as a linguist going to these different conferences
Mhm.
and trying to talk to people about research. Like I just was like, no, that sounds terrible. I'm not doing that.
Mhm.
And so now when I realize how much I do it and I
Mhm.
think it's all fun,
Mhm.
I'm just shocked by it, and it's not because I've grown. Like I'm still an introvert. I still get taxed in situations and need
Yeah.
my alone time and all that stuff. But I just found the place that works for me, the kind of context that works for me
Mhm.
to really be energized by this kind of work and network and the kind of networking I do now. I get excited about, which is really
Yeah.
fun. Yeah.
Well, and I imagine that has to sort of ripple down to like other faculty and students too,
Mhm.
right?
Oh, yeah, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I see it in other. I mean, I'm not taking credit for this, but I think the context has allowed for faculty members, after participating in SAGE, to
Mhm.
launch their own initiatives
Mhm.
that were inspired by the work they did with SAGE, and
Mhm.
that's really cool. So we have several initiatives on campus now that came about from faculty members who just like worked on a project and then just like, we need to do more on this. And then
Mhm.
so Brightside Produce is one example. They are a produce distribution business, student run social
Mhm.
venture. And it started with a single corner store that they were studying through
Mhm.
the SAGE project, and in the corner store was in National City.
Mhm.
And then the faculty member, Iana Castro, just couldn't leave it alone and
Mhm.
ended up launching a business
Wow. Okay.
to address food insecurity through delivering fresh produce to corner stores. This is an amazing program, and some other initiatives related to homelessness and sanitation justice.
Mhm.
Also have sort of some of their kernels of inspiration came from participating in Sage, and I love stories like that. It's really awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally. Okay.
Mhm.
Well, so then, I know it sounds like you go to like conferences and you talk about this and stuff too. Like, I mean, do you ever find yourself like selling this to other universities and like
Oh
how,
yeah.
what's the pitch?
Yeah. Well, so there's this. I helped found a international 501c3 called
Mhm,
the Epic Network. That's where the
mhm,
Epic comes from. And this was with we basically the folks that were running the original programs, so
mhm,
including of course University of Oregon folks, and throughout the U.S. initially got together and started like let's make a network so that we can
mhm,
support each other, and we'll go on the we'll provide trainings because the
mhm,
folks at University of Oregon were already doing all these training workshops because people kept asking them to, and in part they were like, we need help because we
mhm,
can't do all this, but also they ended up being annual conferences to train people how to do this. And so I
mhm,
started participating in those trainings. But then a team of us started like going on the road and doing trainings across the US, and then started doing it internationally too. So I did a training in at a conference in Bonn, in Germany.
mhm,
We went to South Africa twice. We went to Thailand, to Bangkok,
mhm,
and then started when the pandemic hit. Everything went online. But so I've done a lot of consulting in that way, where I've gone to a university and presented on the model,
mhm,
and provided them with the tools to help them launch their programs. And even some universities that have launched their programs that maybe are struggling, I've gone and done some consulting and support
mhm.
to help them launch. I did it for my alma mater, Indiana University. That was fun.
Yeah, yeah.
So there's been a lot of that, and the whole idea. I'm no longer on the board for the Epic Network, but the whole point behind this program is to support other universities around the world in launching programs like this, but then
Mhm,
also helping support them to continue to maintain their programs. And this is in collaboration with the United Nations,
mm,
with Thriving Earth Exchange, a whole bunch of like
yeah.
international organizations, which is really cool.
Okay. Wow.
So
All
yeah.
right. So yeah. So
Mhm.
so so things are afoot. If
Yes.
yeah. W-
Absolutely.
Well, yeah. So what would you? I mean, I'm gonna ask you to kind of get maybe a little bit pie in the sky. Like, what would be like your vision for where this could all go and what it could do, and what would be like the possibility of it all?
Well, I mean, I really think this is something that all universities should be doing, and they
Hmm.
they don't have to do it at the same scale, right?
Hmm.
They and even small liberal arts colleges can and do this,
Hmm.
and they do it at the scale that works for them, right?
Hmm.
But it should be something that is an obvious thing that universities do rather than an add-on. In part because it's really important to train students in this way and to help them, especially now with AI and everything,
Hmm.
to
Yeah.
really make sure that they're still learning how to troubleshoot, problem solve, build their critical thinking skills, but also because like we got challenges and they keep getting worse.
Yeah. Yeah.
so,
Yeah. Yeah.
and so we need to be, it's an all hands on deck kind of situation.
Hmm.
And we should be focusing our energies on solving these big problems in through whatever disciplinary kind of interest that we have.
Hmm.
Right. And climate change being a perfect
Hmm.
example. There's something in it for everybody.
Hmm.
And no matter what your discipline is, you can contribute to addressing, climate change, figuring out how we adapt to and mitigate the impacts of climate change. And that should be these big challenges, the big
Hmm.
problems should be what we're all worrying about. And they should be embedded into how a university is
Hmm. Hmm.
operating. And
Yeah. Yeah.
but that requires some major overhaul of
Hmm.
of how a university is set up.
Hmm.
That part's the hard part. And so, but that's my vision, is that we are less siloed and all kind of working together on
Yeah.
the big issues of our time, and that it's a just a normal kind of operation for any university. That's
Yeah.
what they do. So
Yeah. Yeah. It seems like it could be like it's a big leap, but it could be just such a huge unlock to
yes.
get universities kind of engaged like on that
Yeah.
level. Yeah.
Administratively, it's a challenge because you have your departments and they are within colleges, and the
Mhm.
colleges all have a certain type of we have a college of
Yeah.
science, we have arts and letters, and a lot of times there's not that kind of cross disciplinary interaction. Though the
Yeah.
universities really like when there is
Mhm.
collaboration across disciplines. It's clunky.
Yeah.
It can be clunky. So
Yeah. And it's probably like, as an individual in that thing, it's probably a lot higher like risk or headache than reward to like try and
yeah,
bridge that, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
And I
Hmm.
also think about on the level of like, I mean, I don't know how much this goes on to this day still, but it's just like the learning model of like sitting in lectures and reading
Hmm.
like hundreds of pages and like, maybe having, I guess, like one discussion class a week on other stuff, like just what you're describing just seems like a much more valuable
Hmm.
learning model for
Hmm.
anybody than.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I agree. But I think, one I don't know, there's probably many silver linings to
Mhm.
AI, but it's terrifying for a lot of us.
Yeah.
And as you can imagine, we're really grappling with how to deal with AI at the
Hmm.
university,
Hmm.
because to make sure that students are still learning and not just
Yeah.
relying on AI for everything. And
Hmm.
students are across the board, have different views and different involvement with AI, but it is a definite issue, and we're all having to learn about it and learn how to work with students on it. And I
Hmm.
think one of the kind of things that's going to happen is that people are going to get completely change their what they do in a classroom. And
Yeah.
so it's probably going to be less like what you experienced and what you
Yeah.
think of, like where there's a lecture all day and then they go and are supposed to do the reading and the assignments at
Hmm.
night. Probably that's going to be flipped, and that's going to be more and more how people are doing things, as they have in-class assignments and in-class discussions, and the
Hmm.
students are expected to have read stuff maybe, or watched a lecture,
Hmm.
in their own time. And so maybe that actually has the added benefit of,
Yeah.
focusing more on problem solving and critical thinking. So yeah, but I mean, well, I think we're going to be transformed because of AI. And I think if we can at the same time be trying to incorporate, these sort of models of addressing big problems everywhere, that would be good too.
Yeah. Well, we'll have to put a pin in that conversation because that's gonna that'd be like a whole other
I know. Yeah, yeah, and I
podcast.
am no expert on AI. I mean, I was learning a lot, but I was a reluctant learner, and then
Hmm.
once I learned it, I was like, okay, I should know this because students are using this.
Yeah.
I should know about it. And there's definitely things that I have found very useful about it,
Totally.
but it's also terrifying.
Yeah. Yes. Well, cool. Well, this is probably good place to wrap things up. Is there anything
Yeah.
else you want to add, or anything that you think is really important that we
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's just a little bit about sort of, I mean, it's related to what we were talking about.
Mhm.
What's funny is that I don't really feel like I have a discipline anymore. I
Oh
mean,
yeah, yeah, yeah. Totally.
I'm a linguist, by
Hmm.
training, and I still am involved with research in phonological acquisition
Hmm.
and stuff. But most of my work now is in environmental justice and in
Yeah.
brownfields,
Hmm.
and then this year I'm working on stuff related to earthquakes,
Hmm.
next year it's going to be about something else. And so I'm
Yeah.
sort of the expert in whatever I'm paying attention to that year. And
Hmm.
it's a weird and uncomfortable place to be, but it means I get to learn about lots of different things. But it's weird as an academic, because I don't know how to talk about, like, I'm an expert in, and that is a common
Yeah.
thing we're asked about. Yeah.
Hmm. Hmm.
So that's a
Well, and
weird.
that is like that kind of goes back to the sort of structure of academia, right?
Yes,
Like,
exactly.
yeah, that sort of there could be more flexibility to
Hmm.
where the way because I imagine yeah, other academics that might be interested, it probably is kind of a scary career move, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, for sure. Or
Yeah.
or limit it to kind of the work that they're already doing,
Hmm.
which is fine too. And whatever works in their context. But yeah, but I mean, I learned so much, like I said, in the first year that I started this program, that I
Hmm.
just couldn't believe how much I learned. It was more in than ever in my adult life, right?
Yeah.
And it's so fun to learn all of
Hmm.
these different things, about
Yeah.
all these different disciplines. But I don't have an in-depth knowledge of anything except
Hmm.
linguistics and phonology.
Yeah. Well, it
So
sounds like a perfect thing for an academic with ADHD to
yes,
pursue then.
absolutely. That's true. Yeah.
Yeah.
For someone who just gets bored. Yeah. So
Yeah.
yeah, but I think that would be cool if that's, if we all started sort of like, yeah, I'm going to focus on this type of research, but
Hmm.
I'm going to learn about as much as I can about everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah. Well, yeah, because I mean, like, you are the smart people. Like, this is what should be happening, right?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Well, this has been great. I really appreciate having you on here talking about this because
Thanks so
I
much for
just
having me. Yeah.
think it's such an interesting idea, and yeah, just kind of like I said, just that yeah, I'm kind of coming from it from that community building point of view of
Hmm.
like, let's get universities engaged in the community more, and this just seems such a cool opportunity to do that. So I
Yeah.
really appreciate that you're here to share that.
Yeah. Very happy to share it. As you can tell, I like talking about it. So
All right, perfect. All right, well, thank
thank you
you,
so much.
Jessica, for
Yeah.
being on the pod.
Thanks for having me.
All right,
Talk soon.
bye.
Bye.
Thanks again for Professor Jessica Barlow for joining me on the podcast and sharing her work, her insights, and her vision for, what universities can be when they are truly connected to the communities they serve. And one of the big takeaways I have from this conversation is just that some of the most important learning doesn't happen in a classroom. And that's just obvious. All of us have kind of experienced that, right? It happens when we step out into the real world and start working alongside other people to solve real problems. I also appreciate the honesty that she shared and how institutional factors play a role in making these types of shifts in higher education difficult because, if you're a professor, you're somebody working in that environment, you've got a career trajectory and a reward system that's built in that you're a little bit tied to. Like you want to engage with that system. And so in order to initiate projects like the one that Jessica is involved with, you're potentially taking a risk and it makes it hard to step outside the lines. And so being able to initiate projects like this, especially in the context of universities, it really takes some buy-in from some higher end people at universities. So, I'd be curious to hear from other folks that might listen to this podcast about how they feel about this and what they've noticed at their own institutions that they work at. As you heard me talk about on the podcast there, I just couldn't help but feel like there's just a lot of subtle ripple effects that can come from that engagement that would be hard to quantify. But I think, universities as a whole, just as an institution, would really benefit from having their people, out in the community in so many different ways. You can find links to Jessica's work, the SAGE Project, and the Center for Regional Sustainability in the show notes. And also, if you've enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to subscribe, leave a review, share it with someone who cares about education, community building, sustainability, or creating positive change in the world around them. It really helps more people discover the show. Thanks so much for listening again, and I'll see you next time on Braver New Worlds.